I'm tuning in from Sacramento, California, Northern California myself. So if everyone wants to just throw in the chat where they're tuning in from. Okay, you got Virginia, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, Rhode Island, Florida. Oh yeah, everyone's coming from all over.
Oh, that's great.
Rhode Island.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice, Texas as well. Give it a few more minutes, let some more folks trickle in here. All right, it's at the top of the hour. I'll just give it one more minute, like folks trickle in there. right, well, hello and welcome to the Summer of Learning Professional Development Series. This topic is Building Diverse and Inclusive Workspaces, hosted by Dr. Yolanda Harper and John Bafke. As we examine how to cultivate a diverse and inclusive workspace, what does that vision look like to you? Today, with the help of our two wonderful presenters, we'll touch on the intentionality behind policy and organizational change that leads to attaining inclusivity. Yolanda Harper is a professor and lead faculty teaching several programs in the College of Arts and Sciences at UAGC. She earned her PhD and master's degrees in clinical psychology from the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville, and her bachelor's in psychology from UCLA. She has been teaching with the online campus since 2013 and loves having the opportunities to interact with diverse learners working towards making their dreams reality. John Bafke is an associate professor teaching various programs in the Ford School of Business and Technology at UAGC. He's earned his BA from Yale University in Arabic and Islamic Studies, and later earned his law degree from UCLA School of Law. He has been teaching with the online campus since 2012 and helped co-develop the UAGC DEI course audit rubric, which examines issues of DEI representation within UAGC curriculum. Be sure to be on the lookout for the talkback session link, which will be hosted next week on the same day, same time. There you'll enjoy a roundtable discussion with our two presenters and then other organizational leaders to discuss the topic further. I'll throw the link in the chat now, and then it'll also be emailed to you for further registration after the event. My name is Chris Poget. I'm an education partnership representative with the University of Arizona Global Campus. Be sure to stick around after the presentation for some quick information about UAGC and attending the Global Campus. I'll now hand the floor over to Dr. Harper and Mr. Bafke to demonstrate how we can create a more diverse and inclusive workspace.
Thank you, Chris. Well, hi, everyone. It is great to have you here. We're delighted to be here with you today, and we look forward to you sharing your ideas in the chat along the way, and we hope you'll join us for the talkback session as well. I'm happy to be joined by my colleague, John Bafke, and these are just some of the main key topics for our time together today. Now, several of our slides will have more information that you may have time to take notes on. So feel free to take screenshots of any information you'd like to review in more detail to refer back to later. So John and I will actually start with a vignette, and we're going to intersperse a few vignettes throughout our session to stimulate thought. So let's begin, though, first by reflecting on this statement from our description. Truly inclusive workplaces are built and maintained by intentional actions that affirm all team members, promote psychological safety, and model cultural humility at all levels of the organization. So hold that thought in your mind, what that means to you. And now John and I are going to take on the roles of Jared and Macy. They're colleagues in leadership positions in their companies, and Gerard and Macy have worked together for years, and so they're very comfortable being candid with one another.
Okay. So the main topic of our planning meeting today is that we need to decide who will lead the project team. I'm thinking of recommending Sam Wang.
No, seriously, who should we recommend?
Sam Wang. He's been with the organization for 5 years. He is conscientious and understands our vision. His work is always done with quality and integrity.
But Sam just doesn't fit with the corporate culture. He's just not the leadership type. He's much too quiet, and no one ever really notices him.
I'm curious, what do you think about Jocelyn Johnson?
Jocelyn, oh no, not in a million years. She takes self-promotion to the extreme. Who, at the end of the day, she's going to find some way to make whatever topic you're talking about be about her. You can't get out of a meeting with her without having to listen to some personal story. I could watch soap operas with my grandma at home. I don't come to work to hear your personal drama. Get a therapist. Don't dump your emotional baggage on people who have to go back to work and focus and be nice to our customers. No. All right, so we're John and Yolanda are back. So if you have more than 10 to 20 people in your company or organization, there's a good chance that you have a Gerard, you have a Macy, you have a Sam, and you have a Jocelyn type person in your midst. So please put your thoughts in the chat. Your comments will give us ideas for talkback topics. We have help monitoring the chat, and plus we're going to get copies of it as well. And John is going to now provide an overview of some of the key concepts related to diversity and inclusion, and keep these characters in your mind as John proceeds.
And thank you. And just before we go on, like the vignette kind of shares, there's a lot of issues when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so it's, many layers to many different issues, and some of them aren't easy to parse out. So, some of this will take some time, some discussion. But, before going on, it's kind of good to have a base level of what we're talking about when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And to be honest, there will be many different definitions if you were to look at many different organizations or people who have researched this. We offer this as just an example, kind of as just a starting place. Diversity itself, here is one definition: the presence of differences that may include race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, ethnicity, nationality, social economic status, language, disability, age, religious commitment, or political perspective. And as you can see here, it's a very kind of expansive definition. So when we talk about diversity, it's not just one or two demographics. There's a lot of components that can go into diversity. So there's something that we should keep in mind going forward. Equity here is promoting justice, impartiality, and fairness within the procedures, processes, and distributions of resources by institutions or systems. So here it's kind of making sure everyone has access to resources and visibility and what have you. That's one way to kind of look at it. Inclusion, to round it out when we talk about DEI, inclusion is an outcome to ensure that those that are diverse actually feel and or are welcome. So that's the kind of not only equal access, but we actually everyone feels welcomed when they're within an organization. So that's kind of the inclusion aspect of DE&I. Oh, we can go to the next slide. And so just kind of as a reference, here at the University of Arizona Global Campus have developed a Equity for Excellence, a call to action. At the University of Arizona Global Campus, we're a global community that values diverse perspectives and actually pursues inclusive practices to support the success of our community of student, staff, and faculty. We value the dignity of the human experience. Our commitment is to champion the inclusivity of thought, belief, and choice of all populations, intentionally including the marginalized and underserved as an integral part of our mission, a broader and deeper educational perspective. And for me, the one thing that I focus on is, especially with diversity, is focusing on intentionally including the marginalized and underserved. I think that's an important component when we're addressing DE&I, because those are the populations that we actually want to promote and want to welcome within the folds of our organization. And this, again, this is just an example. Your organization or other organizations don't have to say these exact words, but it's just something to stimulate thought amongst yourselves, maybe your team, as to how you may approach diversity and inclusion. We go to the next slide. And so it's important to remember why we need diversity. Now, a few years ago, there were many arguments that talked about how diversity itself actually improves performance. And there's actually a lot of research that really backs that up, that when you have diverse backgrounds, in professional organizations, that performance improves, revenues increase, and there's basically a lot of positive reasons why we want to have a diverse workforce. That basically help the organization as a whole, and also as going forward, the working population will be millennials. Those will be the workforce that will be making up the majority of our work population. And please, sorry, my cat just jumped. And they're going to be expecting diverse workplaces. So there has been a lot of arguments for performance-based arguments for the purpose of having diverse workplaces. But more recently, there has been a moral case that has really been put out there that DEI shouldn't be embraced just because of like profit expectations, but really it is the right thing to do. And that organizations, when they're engaged in this, really should show their commitment to fight discrimination and to promote historically marginalized populations, and for these moral reasons that really organizations should embrace DE&I policies and procedures and attitudes, and integrating that holistically into their work environment.
Thank you, John. Now, as you're likely aware, having specific hiring goals can certainly boost diversity in numbers, but doing so doesn't necessarily create inclusive cultures. And we're not saying that having hiring goals to boost various types of diversity is not important. What we want to emphasize today is that having a diverse workforce doesn't guarantee that employees will feel valued, appreciated, and connected to the organization. And so that having rosters that appear diverse also will not guarantee that we'll have diverse perspectives. Now, if you would, for a moment, reflect on this statement that we showed you earlier that was from the program description, and think about what it means to you. Clearly, this is a visionary and aspirational statement because we use the word all. And as I like to say, all and never are almost never true. Even so, having an organizational culture that genuinely values diversity and inclusion means that we get it right more often than not, at least to the point that our community members feel psychologically safe and they feel valued. So it doesn't mean that everyone behaves in accordance with the values 100% of the time perfectly. And to illustrate this point, let's consider some of our own personal values. So here we have a list of personal values. It's certainly not an exhaustive list, but just reflect on the list and identify one or two that you would consider are consistent with your own personal values. Or if you're passionate about a value that's not on the list, feel free to reflect on that value and just kind of bring it to mind. Think about what that value means to you. How do you demonstrate in your actions and words that this is a personal value that you hold and are committed to? So just think about that. What does that look like? Now, rate yourself on a scale of 0 to 100. 0 being my actions never demonstrate that I hold this value, and 100 being I am perfect all the time at demonstrating that I hold this value in all areas of my life, with everyone I come in contact with, in all settings, forever and ever. Okay, so just think about it. So where would you place yourself for that value on that scale? So how many 100s do we have? Usually there are 1 or 2 perfect people, right, in the room. But the rest of us tend to be perfectly imperfect and imperfectly perfect, doing the best we can with open minds and open hearts to continue to learn and grow. So the point is that even when our organizations have cultures valuing diversity and inclusion, even if, and I say big if, 100% of our employees are committed to those values, humans are not perfect, okay? Therefore, when we say get there, we don't actually mean an ultimate end point of some organizational utopia. But When diversity and inclusion are truly organizational core values, more often than not, all employees are valued and appreciated. And there's a sense of belonging to the organization, to their units, and to their teams. So with that in mind, if you're developing a list of core values for your unit or your organization, this is something that can be done prior to planning meetings to get people to reflect on what core values resonate and want to be highlighted in your unit or in your organization. So again, take this list, just like the previous list of personal values, we have a list that's not exhaustive, but starting points for some values, core values that can be related to diversity and inclusion. And it can be a good team discussion to create such lists like this and ask members to reflect on which values resonate for them, what values are missing from the list that need to be added, how often their actions are consistent with those values, in what settings and under what conditions is it most likely that they'll demonstrate behaviors not quite consistent with those values. So these types of activities and conversations and self-reflections allow members to acknowledge their humanness and the humanness of their colleagues. And it's not about making excuses for people, but it's about being authentic, about being honest, and creating a context for psychological safety and for practicing cultural humility.
And just to kind of follow up on something Yolanda said, that she mentioned conversations. It's going to take a lot of conversations from leadership on down, co-workers, teams. And there's not going to be just one way to address this issue, but it will take a lot of conversations.
Thank you, John. Great point. And now, as we transition to sharing specific strategies, I will say that while the ideal is to have complete commitment from all within our organization, this is an aspirational goal. It is certainly desirable, but it's not really necessary for cultural elevation. In any culture we study, we can identify core beliefs, behaviors, traditions, and values, and still there will be individual differences. The same is true when elevating our organizational cultures. So hopefully we all will commit to respect and value and affirm and include all of our members in meaningful ways that allow them to contribute their best to the organization. That's one of our ultimate goals. Now, as we move on to discuss some implementation strategies, I would like you to keep some particular tenets in mind. Cultures are revealed through the actions and artifacts produced by individuals and by groups of people. So our words and our actions matter. The absence of action and words also matter. We all share in the responsibility to create positive cultures and to safeguard the shared and individual values related to diversity, inclusion, dignity, and respect. And when we take action, when we speak up, when we remain silent, when we walk out of the room or tune out, when we look engaged, when we roll our eyes and shake our head and sigh, when we nervously chuckle at an inappropriate joke, when we contort our face, clearly biting our tongue, trying to think before we speak, when we choose to act as an ally, an advocate, activist, a bystander, or even when we are the perpetrator, purposefully or accidentally. Each of us are role models and examples, perfectly imperfect, sure, and imperfectly perfect, but we're still role models, understandably doing our best based on what we know and who we are at the moment. And with that context, I'll hand it over to John, who will begin with some implementation strategies. Again, invite you to take screenshots. We have a long list of 15 recommendations, suggestions here. And again, stay tuned for the recording.
Now, these suggestions are not exhaustive, and they're also suggestions as well. So it's not something that is a formula per se. and it's definitely not exhaustive. So there's definitely more that can be added, but these are just things that we can share to stimulate discussion. So one of the things that an organization can do is to create an advisory board, a council, hopefully within the whole organization, or as department and certain units of an organization as need be. But it's good to have people from diverse backgrounds within this advisory board, people who also have experience and insights into the subject. Here at UAGC, we have a presidential change advisory group, which does address issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and is advisory in nature, to help with leadership, kind of guide them through some of the issues, or to raise some of the issues, to alert, their organizations as to, potential minefields and things that need to be addressed, both in the short term and the long term. But it's good to have a sounding board, as opposed to just going it alone within leadership. So an advisory board is very suggested and helpful. Going to leadership really needs to be involved, whether at the top executive level, all through down management, because that increases organizational buy-in, but it also eases the implementation of any DE&I practice, policies, and procedures that may be integrated within an organization. So the more that leadership is involved, the more that the organization is telling all of its workers and followers, this is what we need to do, this is important to us, and this is something that we need to focus on. So having leadership involved is very important. Explicitly stating the integration of DE&I within an organization is very important. Otherwise, it's going to be left up to the interpretation of either consumers or stakeholders or employees themselves. Does this organization really believe in this, or is this just lip service? Where do they stand on this? And so it's important for an organization to explicitly state where they stand on this issue, and to incorporate that into the vision and mission statements of an organization. Another step that can be done is to set goals and monitor data. Now, DE&I isn't a numbers game, and I know previously, from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, there were issues of affirmative action programs that focused more exclusively on numbers, but it's not just a numbers game. Inclusive of more marginalized people isn't by itself going to be enough, because we have to develop a more inclusive work environment where people feel welcomed, and there's an equity there where they're allowed to advance and enjoying resources. At the same time, if something is important to an organization, they will monitor it and see its growth. And so this is another aspect that DE&I, at whatever level, needs to be monitored, and goals set, and regularly the data needs to be reviewed by the organization. Number 5.
Yeah, so I just wanted to emphasize setting the attention to establish a sense of belonging for all. John really touched on why that is important when he talked about goals, and just being mindful of not explicitly or implicitly excluding the majorities. Again, when we say all, we really do mean all. Yeah, John.
So, we're on this slide. Okay. And so creating shared understandings of these definitions, and that's again going back to what we said before, is to have these conversations. I think having the conversations before an organization really wholeheartedly commits to a plan, I think is very important, and that's at all levels. And as an example, within our organization, we had a series of dialogues called Turn the Tide, where we would have discussion forums that were open to all employees from staff on up to the executive level. The president was involved in many of them. And we addressed very specific issues of race, issues related to gender, issues relating to sexual identity. So it's good to have these open and frank conversations, but to have these conversations so that we can share ideas and understandings, and to create the capacity and safety to address issues such as unconscious bias, psychological safety, cultural humility, competency, equity, power, and privilege, and more. These are important as well. Of course, unconscious bias, as you may know, will play a role both collectively and individually. Organizations will have unconscious bias. We all have an unconscious bias, but we need to kind of peel back the layers as to what those biases are and how we can address them, both as maybe as an individual, as a team, but then also greater with the organization as a whole.
And I want to touch on number 9. Particularly want to flesh out the bit where it says, and consider how they will be perceived from a variety of perspectives, lenses, and in different contexts. It's clear how having diverse perspectives in the conversation can assist with this strategy, as long as people are comfortable contributing their views. So again, bringing in the diversity is wonderful, but bringing it in to a psychologically safe environment with people and colleagues practicing from a cultural humility perspective and place helps advance the dialogues and the contributions substantially. So, for example, let's say we're looking at a marketing campaign or we're looking at some type of communication, to be able to say, I know you didn't mean it this way, but some might see that particular image in that campaign as biased or disrespectful. Could we brainstorm some ideas to avoid that negative perception? Or another situation, I realize that some people might be okay with that particular word, but I'm uncomfortable with it. Would you be open to saying something different, like this word or this phrase? Or do we even need it at all? What do you think, or how do you think this will appeal to our customers who are fill in the blank? Or what about our fill in the blank customers who might feel that this particular imagery is not for them? And you want to say something about policies and procedures?
Sure. So, and then specifically, an organization is suggested to develop specific policies and procedures, specifically in the area of recruitment, hiring, and promotion and employee evaluations. This is obviously how individuals are introduced into an organization, as well as how they are welcomed and advance an organization, are very important. And so an organization must be very conscious as to make sure that negative bias doesn't affect marginalized populations, so that people from marginalized populations obviously feel welcome, but then have an equal access to be promoted and to succeed within the organization. So an organization should consciously make sure that those policies and procedures allow for those opportunities to happen to those populations. And kind of following that, related to that, is to also screen technology for bias. Sometimes we rely on software that does deal with demographics, both in hiring, but and also dealing with customer service. And so we need to make sure that there is no unintentional bias within the software itself. A lot of times that can happen unsuspectingly. And so we need to also be very conscious about the software that we use, whether in hiring or anything that deals with people, whether employees or customers, and make sure that that doesn't create a negative unconscious bias to detrimentally, affect the, with your organization. And kind of related to things that we said before, we want to communicate these expectations with all employees, board members, contractors, subcontractors, and basically set a model for your organization. So basically, we want to share with all your stakeholders the expectations that your organization has. So whether that is obviously employees, also vendors, as well as clients and consumers, you want to let them all know this is what the organization stands for, and this is something that in turn we expect from you in dealing with us, so that they know very clearly that this is how your organization operates, and going forward, something that it wants to promote. Um, Actively advocate for public policies, systems, and structures, and promote and improve quality. So again have policies and procedures in place, but to let the organization and your employees know that these policies are in place, and that they not only can rely upon them, but should be relied upon, and something that employees should take advantage of collectively as an organization.
Excellent.
And
Thank
oh,
you,
go
Joe.
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, and once we have those policies, because a lot of times, depending on what our goods or service or product that we're offering to the public is, our policies may be dependent on policies and laws and practices beyond and bigger than our organization. So if we want to see change, sometimes we also have to be willing to work to advocate and change at those levels too, so that it gives us more freedom within our organizations. And then I was going to touch on the last two, unless you wanted to say more on 13,
Go ahead,
John.
please. No, that's
Okay.
fine.
Regarding number 14, decades before the contemporary transition in the language from cultural competency to cultural humility, Dr. Mary Clearing Sky coined the term multicultural life work to emphasize the long-term commitment to the journey, and which begins with an openness to learn. There are, just like crash diets don't lead to long-term results in the way that lifestyle changes do, there are no quick fixes in this venue of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And some like to add justice and belonging as well. There are just no quick fixes, but there are some things that can be done to have some quick results so that people feel empowered and they feel encouraged to advance the organization in positive ways. And then our last strategy on this particular list is important because it speaks to the reality that each team member will be in a different place in their life's journey and will have different needs and preferences, and will respond to various communications and strategies in different ways. So we don't want all of our articles in our newsletters, all of our emails, all of the speeches and presentations from leadership and all of the trainings to be the same. And these are just some examples, a few common examples that we see diversity and inclusion learning opportunities might take. So you do have the surface level ones, fun, food, and music, and other types of activities. There are those that are more academic in nature, so they're going to spend a significant amount of time talking about definitions and theories and research data and statistic. You've got the awareness and sensitivity trainings that offer opportunities to share stories, political realities, cultural generalizations, and exposing sexism, racism, ableism, homophobia, etc. Bringing stereotypes to light, talking about topics such as microaggressions, with the goal of trying to get a deeper understanding of what some individuals deal with. They're the empathy building type of learning opportunities that are often coupled with the previous one or could stand on their own. but they really focus on participants' self-awareness and exposing our own personal biases and ways that we can grow. And then once we have awareness, there's a whole nother level of, there are more therapeutic types of learning opportunities, taking an understanding of our biases are learned, and so they can be unlearned. Some of the injustices and the pains that people have experienced, there can be experiences for them to help heal the hurts from those experiences. And so those type of therapeutic learning opportunities exist. And then there are the skill building learning opportunities that focus on skills such as communication skills. How do you start grassroots or political movements, to be an ally, an advocate, an activist, etc. Emotional intelligence skills, self-efficacy skills, etc. So as you see, these are some of the more common forms diversity and inclusion learning opportunities may take. Some of these will resonate for some people, and some of these will completely irritate other people, because we bring our own personal values, our unique personalities, our communication styles, our interpretations of past life experiences to the diversity learning opportunities and to the dialogues. And sure, with time and commitment, people may choose to learn from and respect communications in a variety of forms. At the same time, it's wise to realize that not everybody in our organization will respond in the same way to each of these formats. For example, highly analytical individuals will more likely be engaged by data and information communicated as facts. Highly emotionally expressive individuals will be more likely to respond positively to personal stories, especially if there's a little bit some drama in the stories that touches their emotions. They're often the ones who are hungry for opportunities to share their stories, like Joycelyn, who was mentioned in our first vignette. These are the individuals who are probably disappointed that we didn't start this session with some heart-wrenching story demonstrating how it hurts to be excluded. Those perspectives are very important to understand. And, you know, if they were doing this session, that's probably how they would have started it. Many highly analytical individuals will by default just tune out those stories and communications, waiting for people to get to the main point. Just tell, what are the strategies? Tell me what to do. Others who are highly action-oriented, the doers and the drivers, they want to see real change yesterday. They want to see progress yesterday. So show them impacts. Give them strategies to implement so that they can make an impact. Those with more peace-loving relational styles, they're going to most likely be moved by communications about fostering harmonious interpersonal relationships with their colleagues. Now, emotionally reserved individuals are often misinterpreted. They should not be misperceived as not caring. They could be analytical, they could be action-oriented, they could just have balanced perspectives so that they're able to see so many different points of view and empathize with a lot of different perspectives, so that they're not, don't appear to be as emotionally moved. It's just they're seeing kind of simultaneously so many different points of view. They may be code switching. They may have an emotional volcano just below the surface, but because it's a psychologically unsafe environment, they're just holding it in and appearing emotionally reserved. So we just don't know. And they just may have less labile personalities. They may just be more peaceful in nature for whatever reason, any of a number of reasons. So it is unfair to necessarily assume that emotionally reserved individuals don't care. So the main point is that if all or even most of our organizational communications cater to just one style, we're not going to maximize the engagement potential, and we are at risk of alienating or minimally boring many of our members most of the time. So please keep putting your comments in the chat as we segue to another vignette, a little short one. John and I have this short vignette we'd like you to reflect on and share your thoughts on as they relate to our next topic of psychological safety. So I'm going to take on the role of Raquel and John will be Felipe. Well, hi, Felipe. What is that article on your desk? Why are you reading about sexual minorities?
Hi, Raquel. I was trying to keep up to date with diversity and inclusion literature that applies to our industry.
Well, I don't even understand why sexual preference,
It's sexual orientation.
whatever, same thing, but all right, okay, I'll be politically correct. I don't see why sexual orientation is even a part of our diversity initiatives. Who people want to sleep with should be a private matter and should stay that way. I don't bring my sex life to work. I have no idea who my staff are sleeping with, except when my secretary had that little thing with the boss. But other than that, when I hire people, I don't care. I hire based on their expertise and their work ethics.
I have a friend who's gay and wants to bring his partner to the company picnic. I'm trying to figure out what to tell him.
Your friend should just come along or say his partner is a cousin. What about you, Felipe? Who are you going to bring to the company picnic?
No one. I will be just going by myself.
John and Yolanda are back now. So consider Felipe's situation or other situations that you are aware of. When and where is it to be safe to be our authentic selves? Now we can have a whole nother discussion about what that means, authentic selves, and we can flesh that out a little more in the talk back. But for now, just whatever comes to your mind when you think of authenticity, work with that. So when is it safe to give feedback if someone makes a disrespectful comment? Felipe tried to correct the language that was inappropriately used. When is it safe to demonstrate an unconscious bias and not be eternally labeled by our colleagues as a fill in the blank, as insensitive or one who always stereotypes and never understands others' perspective? And here, some more questions to think about. How likely do you believe others in your workplace will give you the benefit of the doubt when you speak up or take action? How likely are you to give others the benefit of the doubt when they speak up or take action? So this speaks to trust and psychological safety. And when we say the benefit of the doubt, we're talking about generally assuming positive intention. Now, psychological safety, those very words evoke different images for different people. Initially, some believed that creating psychologically safe environments meant everyone was always walking around on eggshells, afraid to say anything, and that we would have to compromise productivity. That was some of the backlash when that term was first coined in the literature. Actually, having high performance standards and having psychological safety are completely different dimensions, but they do interact such that, for example, as we see here, we can have high psychological safety and low performance standards, and we call that the comfort zone. High safety, high standards, referred to as the learning or the high performance zone. Low safety and low standards, the apathy zone, and low safety and high standards, the anxiety zone. So if you would, answer our poll and share how you most frequently experience your current work unit. And Jenny's going to put up the poll. And Jenny, since I can't see the poll, kind of let me know.
Yeah, no problem. I'm trying to launch it right now. Sorry, give me a sec. It's giving me a error for some reason.
But I just want to, while we're waiting for the poll.
Yeah, we wanted it to be anonymous. I mean, if you're comfortable putting it in the chat, by all means, but we wanted it to be anonymous, so that's why we were doing the poll.
No problem. The poll should be available to all of you in the chat right now.
John, you were going to say something?
Oh, I just appreciate the comments about people are sharing kind of their views about kind of accepting people and for who they are, but to get to know each individual, whether a colleague or customer, as a whole person, to get to know the background and what have you.
I love that whole person. Yes, that's wonderful. So Jenny, just whenever you think people have had, enough time to cast their votes, and get a little summary.
No problem. I still see some trickling in. I'm going to give it about 5 more seconds. So far, it looks like learning zone / high performance zone has 49%. So
Wow. So 49% is great. And it also speaks to work that there's always room for improvement. And even when we're in the learning zone and high performance zone, I mean, learning is key. So things will change and it will be continuing opportunities to continue to grow and learn.
yeah, so it looks like, yes, learning zone, high performance, we're at 51%. Then we have comfort zone coming in at 24%, and then empathy zone at 8%, and then anxiety zone at 17%.
Okay. Thank you all so much for participating in our polls. And like I said, we can flesh those out a little more in the talk back. Now, what can we do? So in her book, Amy Edmondson explains psychological safety is broadly defined as a climate in which people are comfortable expressing and being themselves. More specifically, when people have psychological safety at work, they feel comfortable sharing concerns and making mistakes without fear of embarrassment or retribution. They're confident that they can speak up and they won't be humiliated. They won't be typecast. They won't be ignored. They won't be blamed. They know they can ask questions when they are unsure about something, and they tend to trust and respect their colleagues. And so you can imagine this backdrop can affect, topics related to diversity and inclusion, or it could impact topics not directly related to diversity and inclusion. So how do we make giving and receiving honest feedback a positive experience in our organizations and allow people to learn and grow so that they can give their best to the organization? Okay, for our last vignette for today, this one between Patrice and Juan, and Jeanette is mentioned, but it's not actually in the scene. Again, reflect on what you hear and what you see, and share your thoughts in the chat as they relate to psychological safety, or really other topics related to diversity and inclusion. Okay, so, well, hi, Juan. We need after hours coverage this evening.
I have some things I need to take care of this evening, Patrice. I can cover tomorrow. I stayed yesterday evening and 4 evenings last week. Have you asked Jeanette?
Jeanette has to pick up her kids from aftercare. You're single, you don't have kids, you can stay late. And we do look on that type of commitment to the organization very favorably around here.
Why does everyone assume my needs are not as important just because I don't have children?
Thank you. So based on the very limited information, do you think Juan feels it's a psychologically safe environment for him to speak up? What would be some other options to make it more psychologically safe and really more respectful of his needs? What about from Jeanette's perspective? Does the if this is obviously a current need for the organization, do we need to provide some type of resource or support so that Jeanette can share in, assuming, let's say, that there are overtime opportunities for staying late, and maybe she could benefit from those if there were some other benefits? Or is it time to look at the budget and actually hire someone else that can consistently cover that particular shift or that time slot that's needed? Okay. Now here we're going to share a little bit about culture of humility. Check the time here. So I'll just kind of fast forward through this. we've kind of touched on it in different ways thus far, and shown places where it's needed. Some of the key descriptions associated with cultural humility are listed here. As is typical, different authors will emphasize different characteristics, but here's a starting point. So think about our 3 vignettes that John and I enacted. How might they have turned out differently if all members in the organization, in the conversation, operated from a place of cultural humility? For example, when Macy characterized Sam Wong as too quiet, what if Gerard had said, well, do you think this is really a problem with Sam? Or could it be a perception problem? Or is it something else that we're just not aware of? Or I haven't experienced that with Sam. You know, I find him thoughtful, reflective, and conscientious. What if Raquel had said, after her language and her word choice were corrected, and the question about bringing a partner to the company picnic had come up? What if Raquel had said, well, obviously, I have a lot to learn about sexual minorities. You know, I'd like to read that article that you're reading, and perhaps we can share what we're learning. I imagine if your friend brings their companion to the company picnic, some will be accepting and some won't. But if they choose to, I may not get all of the terminology correct, but they will certainly have my support, and they will have someone to sit with them because I welcome them at my table, or I'll be happy to join them. Rather than one being left to agonize and to wonder why, you know, his needs are not important because he doesn't have children, what would it take to make it psychologically safe and more just more responsive to his needs in that particular organization? So there's always more to learn, always more to know. Lee Moon-Hwa said that we don't learn from experience, but rather from our willingness to experience. Now, we don't learn from experience, but rather our willingness to experience. So think about how that statement sits with you. Now I'm going to read his entire statement. Lee Moon-Hwa stated, the Buddhists say that we don't learn from experience, but rather by our own willingness to experience. The Buddhists say that we don't learn from our experience, but rather our willingness to experience. So did leaving those first few words out strike you differently than when I added his full statement, or not? Just reflect on that. Self-awareness. It's about self-awareness. So some statements that reflect cultural humility include, I'm willing to learn. My view is not the only view. I choose to seek to understand at least 3 perspectives on each topic. I choose not to judge people for not knowing what they don't know, for not feeling the same way I feel, and for not seeing the world the same way I do. I choose to learn to pronounce and spell names correctly. I choose to learn and pronounce and spell names the way the individual pronounces and spells them. I choose to allow people to name themselves. I choose to ask myself, is a label really needed here? Why or why not? I choose to demonstrate interest, appreciation, and respect for others. I own my own choices when I choose to be a bystander, an ally, an advocate, or an activist, actively or passively, and I remain open to learning. And I set an intention to invite situations into my life that will bring to my own awareness my unconscious biases so that I can learn how to prevent them from disrespecting, hurting, invalidating others, from maintaining inequities, and from holding our organization back. And our last little slide here is to wrap this topic up. A key component to cultural humility is knowing ourselves. I titled this slide, Know Thyself, because there's a poem I first heard in Egypt years ago that was attributed to being a translation of a writing by the same title that was, we were told, was several thousand years old. Now, to avoid some of the word choices in the translation from being too distracting, rather than reading the literal translation of the poem, I'm going to present the characters from the poem and the key point. So we have a person who doesn't know, but doesn't know that they don't know. A person who doesn't know and knows they don't know. A person who doesn't know, but believes they know. A person who knows, but doesn't know they know. A person who knows and knows when they know and knows when they don't know. And the punchline is that we are all of the above. John, did you have any closing remarks before we turn it over to Chris?
No, just quickly that, this is, there's a lot to take into consideration. It's not an easy issue or topic to tackle, at least in a short one, but it can be done. But it's something that with thoughtful and meaningful action and planning that collectively we all can address DE&I within our workplaces and our organizations.
And when we're set the intention for it to be a positive learning experience, yes, there are some challenging conversations along the way, but more often than not, they're engaging and actually fun. So I'm going to stop sharing so that Chris can put up.
And if you're interested in learning more about UAGC, our educational benefits, or becoming a partner, you can scan the code or just click on the link that I'm about to throw in the chat as well. And if you requested more information about attending UAGC when you registered for today's session, nothing else that you need to do. One of our advisors will be following up with you very soon. So again, if you enjoyed this session or would like to dive deeper into the subject, I implore you to attend the talkback session when it's hosted next week, same day, same time. I'll throw that link in the chat as well. And so I just want to give one last thank you to Yolanda Harper and John Bathke for that amazing presentation. Make sure to join the talkback session and hear a little bit more. And as we wrap up today, I also want to thank everyone who came out to the session, and thank you all for taking some time to join us. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Chris and Jenny,
us.
for your assistance as well.
Thank you
Yeah.
all.
Thank you.